The 1950s, a decade of innovation and progress. Commercial aviation was in its infancy, capturing the imagination of people worldwide. Sleek silver birds soared across the heavens, connecting continents and shrinking distances. Yet, like all innovations, this airborne revolution carried unforeseen risks. The first hijacking of a commercial aircraft sent shockwaves around the world. An act of air piracy shattered the illusion of safety that surrounded air travel. In the years that followed, more hijackings occurred, each one chipping away at the sense of security. The world was witnessing the birth of a new kind of criminal, one who recognized the power of holding an entire plane hostage. The need for increased security became painfully clear. The year 1958 dawned with a sense of unease in the world of aviation. 5 hijackings in quick succession had sent ripples of fear through the industry. Security measures at airports were rudimentary at best. Passengers boarded aircraft with little more than a cursory glance at their belongings. Little did the world know that the 6th hijacking was not merely a matter of if, but when. Miami, 1958. At Miami International Airport, the air thrummed with a different kind of energy. Among the departing flights was Eastern Airlines Flight 649, its destination, San Juan, Puerto Rico. The boarding process was a symphony of controlled chaos. Each passenger carried their own story, unaware of the sinister turn their journey was about to take. Captain William B. Harkins, a man of quiet authority, took his place at the helm of Flight 649. The passengers of Flight 649 were a microcosm of society. Families, businessmen, an elderly couple, a young woman and college students each carried their own hopes and dreams. And then there was Milt Nicks, outwardly unremarkable, but hiding a dark secret. Beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary traveler lurked a darkness that would soon plunge the flight into chaos. The Lockheed Constellation taxied down the runway, its engines roaring to life. As the plane gained speed, the ground fell away, replaced by a breathtaking panorama of azure sky and fluffy white clouds. The initial euphoria of takeoff gradually gave way to a more subdued atmosphere. Yet beneath the veneer of normalcy, a subtle tension lingered, an unspoken awareness of the recent hijackings. The stage was set, the actors in place, and the curtain was about to rise on a drama that would unfold high above the Pacific Ocean. The Lockheed Constellation, a silver bird against a canvas of blue, soared through the clear morning sky. Inside the cabin, the initial excitement of takeoff had given way to a more subdued atmosphere. Passengers, lulled by the gentle rocking of the plane, settled into the rhythm of the flight. Stewardesses, their movements a carefully choreographed ballet of efficiency, navigated the narrow aisle with practiced grace. For Milt Nicks, the normalcy was a charade, a carefully constructed illusion that did little to mask the turmoil within him. Time seemed to stretch and distort at 30,000 feet. The passengers, their lives intertwined by fate and circumstance, were suspended in a fragile bubble of normalcy. For a fleeting moment, the illusion of tranquility held, but beneath the surface, a current of unease rippled through the cabin. The stewardesses, their smiles now a touch strained, moved through the cabin with a heightened sense of urgency. Unbeknownst to the unsuspecting passengers, a heart of darkness beat within their midst. Milt Nicks, his face a mask of composure, concealed a maelstrom of emotions. He glanced at his fellow passengers, their faces a blur of anonymity, and felt a surge of something akin to guilt, but the feeling was fleeting, quickly replaced by a cold, calculating detachment. The die was cast. The hands on the clock ticked past midday, each second pushing Flight 649 closer to the point of no return. For Milt Nicks, the moment of truth had arrived. He took a deep breath, the air catching in his throat, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. With a swift, practiced movement, Nicks rose from his seat, his hand reaching into his jacket. The fate of Flight 649 and the lives of all those on board now rested in his trembling hands. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin as Milt Nicks brandished the gun, its cold metallic gleam reflecting the overhead lights. Faces contorted in horror, eyes widened in disbelief. The air crackled with palpable tension. United by a primal fear, their lives intertwined. A mother pulled her child close, shielding him. An eerie silence replaced the laughter and conversations. The unthinkable had become reality. News of the hijacking reached the cockpit with the chilling clarity of a lightning strike. Captain Harkins, his hands steady on the controls, felt a wave of icy dread wash over him. The words, relayed through the intercom by a trembling stewardess, hung in the air, their meaning impossible to misunderstand. Flight 649, once a symbol of progress and adventure, was now a prison, hurtling through the sky at the mercy of a madman. He exchanged a look with his co-pilot, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation. The air in the cockpit, usually abuzz with the hum of instruments and the murmur of routine communication, crackled with tension. They had trained for emergencies, practiced countless scenarios, but nothing could have prepared them for this. "What are our options?" the co-pilot asked, his voice barely a whisper. Harkins, his mind racing, weighed their choices. They were alone, thousands of feet above the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, with the lives of 65 passengers and crew hanging in the balance. Their every decision, every action carried the weight of life and death. The atmosphere in the cockpit was thick with tension. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Captain Harkins. Harkins' voice, though strained, remained steady. "He's demanding we fly to Cuba." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. With a heavy heart, Captain Harkins made the decision to comply. He banked the Lockheed Constellation sharply. Unbeknownst to Nicks, the cockpit was not a sealed chamber of despair. Technology offered a glimmer of hope in this desperate situation. A silent conversation was taking place between the cockpit and the outside world. Captain Harkins spoke in coded phrases, his words weaving a tapestry of distress. The message was clear. Eastern Airlines Flight 649 was under the control of a hijacker. Miles below, the faint whispers in the sky were intercepted by air traffic control. Operators listened intently, relaying the chilling news up the chain of command. The wheels of bureaucracy began to grind into action, fueled by the urgency of the situation. The silent plea for help had pierced the veil of normalcy, shattering the illusion of safety. The world was about to receive a crash course in the high-stakes game of aerial hostage negotiation. Every passing minute was both a victory and a defeat. Each tick of the clock meant more time for authorities to mobilize, yet also brought the hijacked aircraft closer to Cuban airspace. The tension in the cockpit was palpable, a suffocating presence that hung heavy in the air. Captain Harkins, his gaze alternating between the instrument panel and the airspace ahead, mentally calculated distances, fuel reserves, and potential scenarios. His mind, honed by years of experience, transformed into a battlefield where strategy and instinct clashed in a desperate bid for survival. He knew that every decision, every maneuver was being scrutinized, not only by the desperate eyes in the cabin, but also by unseen forces on the ground. The fate of Flight 649 and the lives it carried rested precariously on his ability to navigate this treacherous airspace, to maintain a delicate balance between compliance and defiance. The race against time had begun. The sharp turn of the aircraft, the sudden deviation from its intended course, sent a jolt of fear through the cabin. The word hijacking, spoken in hushed tones, a chilling confirmation of their worst nightmares. The passengers of Flight 649, their fates hanging precariously in the balance. Time seemed to warp within the hijacked aircraft. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The world outside offered no escape from the terror gripping Flight 649. The Lockheed Constellation had become a steel coffin, hurtling through the sky. Milt Nicks, gun in hand, paced the aisle, eyes searching for defiance. His face bore a mix of fear and exhilaration. The coded message crackled through the airwaves, a chilling distress signal piercing the routine hum of air traffic control. The calmness of the Miami control tower vanished, replaced by a frantic scramble. The news of Flight 649's hijacking spread like wildfire. The FBI mobilized with a speed born of both experience and urgency. Fighter jets roared to life, their engines screaming a promise of swift retribution. Miles above the Atlantic, Flight 649 continued its perilous journey, its trajectory a stark line on the radar screens. Fighter jets, dispatched urgently, sliced through the sky. Pilots, faces grim, received their orders. Intercept, observe, and await further instructions. The use of force loomed over the operation. Fighter jets closed in on the hijacked airliner. They appeared as guardians, a silent message of defiance. The lives of innocent passengers hung in the balance. Inside the cabin of Flight 649, fear and uncertainty reigned. Faces pale, passengers searched the sky for hope. Their ordeal played out on radar screens miles below. Captain Harkins, knuckles white, maintained a steady course. Fighter jets, unseen, were a lifeline. The radio crackled, a young pilot's voice breaking the silence. "Eastern 649, this is Air Force 17. We are here to assist." Help had arrived. The cavalry was here. Milt Nicks, his confidence beginning to waver, felt a growing sense of unease. The silence from the cockpit, the lack of communication from the outside world, was unnerving. His carefully constructed plan, fueled by desperation and a distorted sense of righteousness, was starting to unravel. He paced the aisle, his eyes darting, his hand never straying far from the gun tucked into his waistband. The fear in the eyes of the passengers, once a source of perverse satisfaction, now fueled a growing sense of doubt within him. Was he in control as he had imagined, or was he a puppet dancing to a tune he couldn't hear, manipulated by forces beyond his comprehension? He stopped abruptly, his gaze drawn to the window. The setting sun, a fiery orb sinking towards the horizon, cast the clouds in hues of orange and purple. A breathtaking spectacle that did little to ease the turmoil within him. And then he saw them. Two fighter jets, their silhouettes stark against the fading light, flanking the Lockheed Constellation. Panic surged through him, cold and sharp. His escape route, his leverage, was gone. He was trapped, a rat in a cage, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Desperate measures. Nick's mind raced, his carefully constructed plan disintegrating like a sandcastle in a hurricane. The sight of the fighter jets, a stark reminder of the forces arrayed against him, shattered his composure. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal instinct to fight, to flee, to do anything but surrender to the inevitable. He whirled around, his eyes scanning the faces of the terrified passengers, searching for a hostage, a bargaining chip, anything to regain a semblance of control. His gaze fell on a young woman, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. She shrank back in her seat, but Nicks, his own fear overriding any shred of compassion, was beyond reason. "You!" he barked, his voice hoarse, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Get up here, now!" The woman, paralyzed by fear, couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her mind, overwhelmed by the sudden surge of adrenaline, could only process the imminent threat, the gun pointed at her chest. Nicks, his patience exhausted, lunged towards her, his free hand reaching out, his fingers closing around her arm with a bruising grip. In the cockpit, a plan was unfolding. Captain Harkins, his eyes darting between the instrument panel and the tense scene unfolding behind him, saw an opportunity in Nick's moment of desperation. He had to act quickly, decisively, before the situation escalated beyond control. "Get ready," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible above the roar of the engines. His co-pilot, his face a mask of concentration, nodded curtly, his hands hovering over the controls, anticipating the captain's next command. Harkins took a deep breath, steeling himself for the maneuver. It was a risky move, one that could have disastrous consequences if it went wrong. But the lives of his passengers, their fate intertwined with his own, depended on his skill, his judgment, his willingness to risk everything on a desperate gamble. "Now!" he barked, his voice sharp, commanding. The co-pilot reacted instantly, his hands moving with practiced precision. The Lockheed Constellation, as if responding to its captain's will, banked sharply, the sudden change in inertia sending a ripple of shock through the cabin. The wheels of the Lockheed Constellation kissed the tarmac, the screech of tires a jarring counterpoint to the frantic pounding of hearts within. The daring maneuver had paid off. Before Nicks could recover, the cabin door burst open. A wave of blue uniforms surged into the aircraft. The ordeal was over. The nightmare had come to an end. As Nicks was dragged away, a collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin. The passengers of Flight 649 emerged into the Florida sunshine. Justice would be served. The hijacking of Eastern Airlines Flight 649 sent shockwaves through the world of aviation, exposing the vulnerabilities of an industry grappling with the growing pains of a new era. The incident served as a stark reminder that the freedom of the skies came with a price. Airports around the world underwent a transformation. Security measures were tightened, metal detectors became commonplace, and air marshals became a familiar sight on flights. The world responded with technology, training, and awareness. The legacy of Flight 649 extends far beyond reinforced cockpit doors. It serves as a testament to courage and resilience. The skies remain a battleground, a constant tug-of-war, but with each challenge the world learns, adapts, and strengthens its resolve. The dream of flight will never be grounded by fear.